Welcome to the We Leaders podcast, where leaders share how to leave a legacy that makes history. I'm your host, Alana Fulvio. As a 13-time world record-holding skydiver and Olympic development athlete, psychic intuitive, and former Silicon Valley in-house talent advisor for some of the most legendary leaders and successful companies in history, there is a new bar being set for leadership. They're called We Leaders. What this means for you on this show, We Leaders will show up for you and bring their unapologetic truth, most successful strategies and mindsets so you can level up. We share from our shoes so you can walk in them. Here, the only rules are authenticity, respect, and being in service of every human having the lives they want. Join the movement. Welcome to the We Leaders podcast. Now let's go make history. I am so excited to be here on the We Leaders podcast and be launching this movement, this type of consciousness of what kind of leader has been needed actually, but what kind of leader is the type of leader that not only we need for the future, but that people are just dying for. They're really calling out to the world. So one thing that I will say about this moment in history is the moment COVID hit, it was brilliant. I mean, it was horrible when COVID hit. Countries were shut down. People were losing their jobs. Just economies were collapsing. People were collapsing. The world became something that no one ever knew. I mean, I think the much older generation, the people in their 80s, 90s, et cetera, if anyone's older than that, they know devastation. And this was a global devastation, which just essentially came out of nowhere. And the moment I remember sitting in my kitchen, because when there's those moments where like 9/11, I remember everything about the moment when I heard about it, when I clicked the TV on and I looked up and my TV was up on a stand and I watched over and over again the video of the planes hitting the towers. And I remember the sun, I remember it was daytime, and I remember everything about how I felt, what was around me with the couch hat on it, the cat walking around. I remember everything about it. And when COVID hit, it was the exact same way. I was in my kitchen and I got the news, and the first wave was, wow, like this is intense. What is this all going to feel like? And the next moment was, wow, people are going to come home. And the message of coming home has been ever so prevalent with people during this pandemic for various different reasons. And one of the biggest reasons that I see is when COVID hit, it was just really out of the blue. No one really understood what to do, how to deal with it. It was chaos. And when humans are in a space of the unknown, and humans are in a space of chaos, the majority of them break down. Most people don't rise to the occasion and say, wow, what can I learn from this right now? Like, how can I step up and in? And there are those leaders that do, and we'll get to that too, because those are who we call the We Leaders. And even, I will say, even the people who were in breakdown to start, a lot of them have risen into We Leadership, and some are just waiting to emerge. I think people evolve at different times and take on challenges at different paces. And so when COVID hit, I just sat there and I went, wow, this is going to be an incredible time in history because all eyes are going to be on leadership. And I have a view of the Silicon Valley where I spent the majority of my career actually, and it was intense. I will say the Silicon Valley is pretty ruthless, even though there are, there's a lot of, we want to create culture and, we want diversity and inclusion. I will say that, I was in recruitment. I was in human resources for over, 15, 16 years, and I'm still in that realm, but just in another way. And I will say that as much as people wanted it, they didn't act it. And there's one thing about saying words and another thing about actually acting it out. If any of you have ever dated, which I think the majority of you have, when you date someone that they say one thing and they don't do it. or they say one thing and they do another. Their actions don't match their words. That's really what I saw a lot. My experience at the Silicon Valley was a lot like that. There were some incredible leaders that I had around me. I wasn't fortunate to be under a lot of those leaders one-to-one, but I did look to those leaders who I saw look to the collective whole and said, in times of prosperity, in times of chaos and breakdown, what am I going to do? And who were they to them? And so there was one leader at LinkedIn who I really admired him. He was a fabulous leader. Didn't always rub people the right way because he spoke his truth. I admired him for that. I admire people who just say what's there for them. You don't have to be a jerk. You don't have to, bring hatred. That's not my way. But you speak your truth, and you speak your truth from a place of logic, reason, and inclusion. Because he also knew he didn't know everything. He also knew that he knew a lot. And so what he knew a lot of, he spoke about, and what he didn't know a lot, I watched him collaborate with others. And how that relates to the moment that I heard about COVID, I thought this is going to be a moment in history where leaders are either consciously aware or unconscious going into this pandemic. And there's going to be leaders that are blindsided by their people falling off from supporting them, from following them, because they think they're actually being we leaders. They think that they're leaders who, have their employees' best interest, when in actuality, they've never invested in what that actually means. And then there's the leadership who is conscious, who says, my journey, my me leadership is very important for the foundation of how I lead as a we leader, right? Because me leadership is focused inward. How am I going to be a leader to myself? Because there's no way. It's like having a family or partner or anything. If you're not anything for yourself, you cannot be outward. So when the pandemic hit, it was, I thought, brilliant. Let's break down the confines. Let's shake out all these quote leaders that think they're leaders, that some want to be we leaders, but they just don't know how yet, and they don't have access to. And besides myself, there's other people who I'm going to be bringing to the table on this podcast and in other forums and other venues that are really going to be offerings and in service of people who want to become we leaders, but just don't have the access to it. And then there's those people that don't intentionally invest in how to be a servant leader and just assume that that's what they're doing. And I will say that when COVID hit, I thought this is brilliant, because what we're going to see out there is we're going to see the we leaders rise, and we're going to see the people around them rising with them without even trying so hard. Why? Because we leaders, when they rise, the other rise around them. When me leaders tried to lead through a pandemic, through chaos, through breakdown, they've watched pretty much everyone falling away from them. And the people that do remain around we leaders are me leaders as well. And so it's actually not a linking arms in a collective whole. It's everyone looking out for themselves. It's you versus me. But they're not going, me leaders tend to not be great communicators and authentic human beings. They tend to be more either silent dominators or outward dominators. I had a manager, I went in-house for a company about 4 years ago, and I had a leader who was a silent dominator. And then at one point, and actually 2 or 3 points, he came out and verbally yelled and screamed at me in front of people on Zoom meetings, on webinars, on in person, right in front of me, in front of other people. And that, to me, that kind of aggression is not a me leader, is not a we leader, it's a me leader. And there's fear in that. And there's not the desire to know what's going on for the other people. So when this pandemic hit, I thought, this is brilliant. I feel I'm an intuit and an empath. I mean, there's a lot of empaths out there. I'm a very deep intuit, and I can feel what's going on beyond just, myself and others. And when this happened, I was so saddened, and so I felt the world needing people to rise up and in. And so actually I did a summit called The Profitable Leader. And actually it's not just focused. I actually went out and I sought out 24 profitable leaders globally. Most of them I didn't even know. And a lot are going to be on this podcast as well, sharing about how they lead by focusing on we, not just me, right? Because they have that balance. We leaders have that balance. Me leaders are one-sided, right? And they dominate in their own way, and they are facade in the way in which, or there's some that aren't a facade. Some just don't care. Let's just get straight. Some me leaders just don't care. And they're just outwardly, dominating, or jerks, or, submissive. They dominate into submission other people, and they're not collaborative. And the diversity and inclusion isn't on their radar, because even in their own race, they don't see that differences are where our power lies together. So when the pandemic hit, I thought, this is brilliant. Let's shake out all of these me leaders. Let's let them see who follows them and who doesn't, right? And it's not, I wanted them to fail. It's that I actually wanted them to rise, because if you can actually put a me leader in a breakdown, you give them the opportunity to rise up into we leadership. And the hope is that they would seek out the opportunity to learn and grow, where we leaders around them are the people who, in chaos, in breakdown, in good times, in bad times, go, I'm not going to be just committed to me. I'm going to be committed to the collective whole and how we're going to get through this. There are companies around like Salesforce, like NerdWallet, like other companies here in the Bay Area. And there's tons that I can actually note by name, because, and actually globally, I tracked this pandemic. I tracked what leaders were doing, and I'm still tracking them, because it's like grief. And I mentioned to you on episode number 1 that my husband died. And the journey of grief also relates to the pandemic as well. People are still going through their journey of grief right now, regardless if they're thriving or regardless if there's breakdown in their life. And there's the majority of people in the world that are in breakdown in some way, shape, or form. I mentioned I talked about home and how the pandemic hit, and I knew, and the message to me was, everyone's now going home. And what that means is and it's still happening, right? There was a funny saying actually that it said, Mother Nature got so mad at us, she sent us to our room, because what we were doing to her. And it's true. I mean, I'm a full believer that human beings, for the most part, aren't consciously intentional about what their impact and their footprint is on this earth, until they're actually brought into their own breakdown, and then they open their eyes. But the majority die not actually opening their eyes on their own, because a lot of times it's too hard to see. It's too hard to see the cow that you eat, being slaughtered, or the fur that you wear, being, I won't go into it, but that's a whole nother episode. But going home, for the subject matter of going home, the pandemic sent everyone home, and it wasn't just in the confines of their wall. It sent them home to themselves. You had to go inward. Why? Because you had to figure out, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to come out on the other end? Oh, not just okay. Some people just are okay with being okay. And you know what? If you get through this pandemic, okay, you're doing pretty well. Right? And then there's some people that went home inward and said, how can I push through and thrive for myself? Right? Then there's the we leaders that step up in and said, how am I going to push through this on my own? And how am I going to support others around me to do the same? And I just got chills, because I'm still tracking people to this day. What are people doing to support others to thrive during this time? Right? And you see a lot of, we leaders thriving right now. And what you'll notice, without them saying I'm a we leader, because it's actually a very new term, is you'll see that the people around them are thriving as well. So everyone went home. Everyone was sent home to be with themselves and what you've created, what they've created for their lives. Are you okay with that? The pandemic sent us home to our families and said, this is what you've created for your life. And, some people create a life of traveling all the time without their spouse or family or whatnot, or different types of lifestyles. And there's no judgment on what someone creates for their lifestyle. But the fact of the matter is I watched a lot of people be totally in breakdown when they were sent home to be with the people that they have chosen to commit their life to, who then they had to go home and actually be with, which was completely fascinating for me, because I thought, wow, there's an unintentionality happening within this universe. There's a desire to have your eyes closed to what the truth of your life is, and your eyes wide open to serving me. And the pandemic sent everyone home, which I thought was brilliant. And sadly, it's happened. It continues, especially in America, for months and months on end, where we're still in quarantine, like for here in California. And I'm still in the walls of my home, and I've redone my home many times to try to mix it up a little. But we're still being sent home and saying, and the question is, when you're in a space of breakdown and you're in a space of chaos and you're in a space of the unknown, who do you show up as? When you have to go home, when you're forced to go home, when you're forced to step in a place of the unknown and be just with yourself and pull from your soul, what do you pull? Do you pull me leadership, or do you pull we leadership? That's the message of this episode, is really, I was just thinking about that day of the day that the pandemic hit, is I asked myself, where are you going to pull from, Elena? Where are you going to pull? And I launched. It was a lot of work. I pulled deep and I said, I'm here for others. I launched, and it's not my primary focus in my career. Actually, it's actually about 5-10% of my career, which is career coaching, life coaching people to, there's a lot of career coaches out there, and there's people that search for careers. And I'll say, people think that applying to jobs is actually the way to get a job. And it's actually, everyone else in the world applies as well. So I actually launched a webinar offering my services at a majorly discounted price, and some for free, based on what people could provide for them to be able to come home and say, what's important to you? Because that's what I do, is I allow people to help them break through first to who are you? Go inward, look at yourself, me, home. What does home mean for you? And then I have them look outward and say, what kind of leader do you want to, what kind of leader do I want to follow? Do I want to follow? Because once you've been forced to come home and your eyes are wide open and you're intentional about being conscious when you're home, with yourself, with your family, with your friends, with your business, when you're intentional about being conscious and awake, you discover things that you were pushing down, that you were willing to be unconscious about. And I also launched the summit as well. That was a lot of work. I've never launched a summit in my life. And I tracked down 24 people on this earth who are serving themselves and others. And they are making, most of them are millionaires, multi-millionaires with multiple businesses. And the people around them are thriving because their core, their home is we leadership, not me leadership. And they know how to work that in the best way possible. And so as much as I feel for the world, I was impacted in some ways. I had to pivot during this pandemic, and I'm still pivoting. I've become a great breakthrough coach for females to travel solo based off my years and years of just dropping myself into places or jumping in my RV and having no place to go, and becoming a skydiver, and being fully fearful of that. And I'm now coaching women to break through their boundaries to do whatever they want in their life. And then also coaching me leaders into we leadership. And there's some me leaders that really love being me leaders. They love it. And I do hope for them someday that they break into we leadership, because it's the magic, actually. So the concept of coming home really hit me the day of the pandemic. And I think it's a brilliant concept to think about, is who are you inside of you? Who are you at home? Are you a me leader, or are you a we leader? And look at the people around you. How do you show up for them? Not what you say, but what you do. How do you show up for them? What would they say about you? And then how do you show up for the world? Really, how do you show up for the world? It's a big, some of you find it difficult to drive 10 miles away. I get it. But your world could be within those 10 miles. I always tell people, when I was on my road trip, it was brilliant. I think I was in the deep South, and I was getting gas in this magical, beautiful, older Black woman just peeked her head around the corner and she goes, darling, she goes, are you alone in that RV? And I said, yeah, yes, ma'am, I am. And she said, well, why are you alone? You can't be alone. Like, you're a woman. And I said, yeah. I said, it's amazing. And she said, I would love to do something like that, but I can't. And I said, yes, you can. She goes, oh no, I couldn't. She had her granddaughter in the car. And she said, oh, I have seven grandchildren. And I said, and I pointed her without saying go home, but I pointed her back into what was true for her, who she was being for herself. And I said, is there a place? I said, you don't have to travel around the US like I did, with no plan, or across tons and tons of states with no plan and randomly just, traveling. I said, is there a place maybe an hour from you that you'd like to go? She goes, oh yes, I would love this one. And she just magically painted this picture for me. And I said, great. Have you ever gotten in your car to go there? And she says, oh no, darling, I couldn't do that. And I said, why is that? And she goes, oh, I'm too scared. And I said, great. And I pointed her home without saying go home. I said, when's your next day off from your grandchildren? And she goes, oh, I have next Tuesday and Wednesday off. And I said, great. How about next Tuesday? You get up and you put your keys in your hand on your way to go to this magical place. She goes, okay. And I said, and that's it. She said, that's it. And I said, yeah, that's more than you've ever done. And she goes, okay. And I said, and if that feels okay, grab your purse. It was okay. And I said, and if you feel strong, open the door. Open the door and look at your car. Become a partner with that car. And if you feel strong enough, get in your car and just sit there. Don't turn it on. Just sit there. And let yourself smile that you've just taken 3 steps that you've never taken before. And you still don't have to go anywhere. And I kept going on, step by step by step. When it comes to we leadership, it doesn't mean, as someone said to me, you have to boil the ocean. Just boil a cup of water each time. We leaders get that the investment in each integral person and each integral moment on their home, on what's important to them, is what has the world thrive. That is the magic of we leadership. We leadership is about the collective winning. We leadership is about going home, understanding everyone's home. And home is your culture. Home is who you are in your soul. We leaders want to know. They desire it. They're fueled by who are these people around me that are supporting me? How can I support them? Because they're the brilliant ones. We leaders are brilliant. Why? Because they're authentically servants of others. Me leaders will serve others with the intention of taking. I have a nonprofit that I'm building called Give to Give, because I'll do respect to the Bay Area, but this area is really what can you do for me? And if you ever go out to dinner, which we're not right now, but if you do, it's the first 2 questions are always, where do you work and what do you do? It's never, wow, who are you? What do you like in your life? What are your values? And it's like a sizing up, right? So it's not a way of authentically finding out someone's home or diving into someone's, what fuels you? What fuels you? And being so excited that maybe something that they said is something that you don't have. And that's the magic of we leadership. We leaders sit there and they are fascinated. They are excited about something that's not themselves. And they're curious. And especially when they're working with other people or they're partnering with them in their lives, husband, wife, partner, lover, you want to know what their differences are so that you can support those. That right there is a we leader. We leaders go home. They know what home means. So concluding this podcast, what popped in my head, and this is what happens. I call myself the momentous because literally something will happen. It could be someone said a word and I got inspired, or a leaf will fall and I'll have an idea. And it's never I sit down and go, okay, I'm going to create this podcast or this episode. That's not the way that I work. I actually work based off of, I'm inspired by a moment or a thought or an idea or someone or something happens. And then it comes out of my soul. And I had the vision of the moment the pandemic hit. And where did I go? What did I do? What home did I go to? And I'm proud to say I stepped into we leadership. Now I can say I didn't serve myself as much as I did outward. That's a balance aspect as well. And there's maybe some of you out there that serve others more than you serve yourself. Most of us intuits and empaths, we do that. That's another episode that I'll talk about that as well. How to be a we leader inward towards yourself, towards your own personal development, your own personal growth, and being conscious of that. But the message of this podcast, I can't stress it enough, is ask yourself, who are you? Do you want to know someone else's home? What do you do in chaos? What do you do in breakdown? What do you do when there's not breakdown? Who do you show up as for yourself and for others? Go home. Go be with it. Go sit with it. As is. Don't create anything around it. Don't shiny it up so that it's better for you. Go be authentically with what's in front of you. Leaders in business, go sit authentically in front of your employees one by one and go home. Find out their home. Go home to your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your lover, your animals. Go find out. Go be with them. Go home. Going home is one of the most magical things you can ever do for yourself inward, with me first, to be able to offer we to the world. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you so much for being present with this. And if going home inspired you, if you had something that you thought about it, or the pandemic, or you'd love to challenge me, or you resonated and you want to talk about going home, I'd love to create something around that. So yeah, thanks again for being present and for sharing this time. All right, we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.